Thank you for listening to our Sunday Plus podcast. For more great content, please use the LifePoint app, which you can download today at lifepointaz.com.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode. It's our second episode of Midweek Online. I have a confession. We recorded last week's. We were consistent in recording every week.
Yes.
But our audio was a little messed up. So
That's janky, man.
you know what? We're still figuring this thing out, and so you got to give it But anyway, we're gonna talk about the last two messages over the course of this podcast. So thank you so much for joining. My name is Josh. I'm the youth pastor here at LifePoint Church. So good to be with you, and I'm joined by.
I am Jeremy Brinkerhoff, the executive pastor.
There you go, the executive. That's the It's a great title.
Oh, yes.
Powerful title.
Very powerful. It does inspire awe.
Ooh. And then when people ask, what do you do?
I go, hey, it's really been nice to see you today. You should repent of your sins.
Oh, man. So good. Yeah. Man, these last two weeks have been incredible in service. I've been really just enjoying these messages and the series as a whole. It's just so good. We talked about this. There's a lot of carryover. So if you hear us referencing last week, please know, again, we recorded an episode. But we talked about how it's good to kick off 2023 with a series like this and with a focus like this, because it seems so elementary, this thing of God's love and loving other people. It gets so like Sunday school, you know what I mean, where we just don't either know enough about it, we don't believe it for ourselves, or we think we know more than we do. And so that's why when Pastor Mike said, hey, I really think that this is the direction that God is leading us, we all got really excited, and it's just been amazing to see him unpack this over the last 3 weeks, and we'll be talking about the last two. 2 weeks ago, he really hit on the thing of what God does for love, which I think is important, because until you understand and grasp what God has done for us, we can't actually either accept that love for ourselves, which I think a lot of people have a tough time with, or we can't extend that love to others in a true way when we don't understand what God has done for us. So like, what is it for you about the love of God that really like stands out, that really has marked in your life, or even just recently, what has been going on when it comes to just unpacking that for you?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and honestly, as you were talking right there, not that I'd be dishonest with you, because we're recording, it's going to live forever, but one of those aspects I think that is so important about that thing of God's love is that we become very familiar with it. It's one of those very first things in church that you're taught as a small child, and so you have this thing of God loves me, and God loves the world, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's one of those things where I've kind of been replaying the last few years of my life, and my son's about to go away to college, and so I'm thinking about my college experience and what I really want to impart to him, and realizing that I have this tendency, when I lived in California, super close to the Sierra Nevada mountains, incredible mountain ranges, all kinds of glades, and I mean, it's so close to these huge peaks with forests and all this kind of stuff, right? But it was so close that I didn't really take advantage of it. And then when I moved away, I'm like, oh my gosh. And same thing when I moved here to Arizona, the Grand Canyon's like right here. But it took me 15 years to go and see the Grand Canyon.
So that's interesting that you say that, because my parents have been to Arizona. They helped move me out in 2019 when I came. It's crazy. It's almost been 4 years. It was wild. But they came and they were like, we got to see the Grand Canyon. Got to go. So we all went. They came back for my wedding. That was the next time they actually came back. They were like, oh, great, second time in Arizona, and we're working yet again, moving you the first time, and now we're doing this. And they had been, they were like, well, we got to go because my brother was with them. And so now it's a whole new experience. We got to go to the Grand Canyon again. And then they're talking about coming back in the summer, and they're like, okay, so like, what day are we going to do this Grand Canyon thing? And it's hilarious, because when you talk to people, like my wife, Macy, is from here. And she's only been, I think, on like a school field trip, like in middle school or elementary school or something. And then there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I've lived here for like 20 years and just never been.
Because it's one of those things. It's so close, and you're like, well, I could just do it next year, or I could just do it another time. And so time comes and
Yeah.
goes and you don't do it. And I think it's that way, very much so
Yeah.
with God's love. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, it's there, and I'm familiar with it, but
Yeah.
we really haven't really explored. We haven't
Yeah.
gone to those depths to look at what God's love
Yep.
means and how it informs our day-to-day life,
Yeah.
and how it informs how we interact with each other, and then how we receive his love. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've really found good about this series.
Yep.
It's an important thing, and honestly, like, there's been a lot of kind of crossover from week to week, but it's really important that we hit on these
Yes.
things. And I think last week we talked about and this whole thing of the personal aspect
Yeah.
of God's love.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really one of those things that I began to see his hand in my life as I did go to college, and
Yep.
And I saw that he had been preparing me for the things that I was about
Yeah.
to experience. And so when that came about, when I really saw that that it was not just sort of this random process that discipleship was in my life or anything like that, but that he had really given me different experiences to prepare me then for when I went to college.
Yeah.
My roommates were nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
They were involved in things that I thought maybe would be part of a really bad movie that no one would ever watch. And to see people walking out their
and
lives
you're
like this, I
right in
was
front of
blown
it.
away.
Yep.
But because of that path that he had taken me on,
Yeah.
Man, I was able to be light and salt
Yep.
in that place,
Yep.
and not just completely freak out.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting talking about the college experience. Your son is actually the only senior that we have in youth right now.
Whoa.
And so just been talking with him about a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
And we've been talking about that experience, and he's looking at a school that's a little further away, right?
Yeah,
And so
really
it's like,
far away.
and so I did the same thing where not quite as far, but 7 hours, from Kentucky to Missouri. And that college experience for me is a very similar way in which I encountered the love of God in a very personal way. And I think that you do, whether it's going off to college, whether it is separating yourself or just getting alone, like right now, we're closing out our fasting time, and just being alone, I feel like is so important in the growth aspect and the relationship aspect of how we interact with the Lord, because it was in moments where where I was alone in my dorm or with a very few amount of people, that I had some of the most impactful encounters that have really shaped my spiritual walk. I experienced so much growth and so much just my relationship with the Lord became very tangible and very real as I stepped away and stepped into something that was more me than, like what I was doing with my family. And so I do think that that's kind of an important thing. And obviously we have the college experiences, but I think that, it is important, whatever you can do to make room and to make space to be able to experience that relationship. In worship, I think Pastor Jesse has done just an amazing job. Elisa as well, our lead pastor's wife, man, just an amazing job of creating a worship culture in our church. And so I would even encourage you, man, it's sometimes easy in a big room like this to kind of get like, I'm just going to kind of twiddle my thumbs, or I don't know what to do. We have all the flashy lights now and the LED one. No, and so it's like you don't know what to do, and it could be overwhelming. But finding those intentional spaces, even within worship, I feel like, with a larger congregation to praise the Lord in a very personal way, I think are the times where the Lord wants to speak the loudest. I tell my students a lot in our times of response that the worship song that we do at the end is honestly the most important time, because the Lord can speak something. It might be a confirmation from something that has been spoken previously, like, in our transitions or my message. But for the most part, like, the Lord can speak something completely like personal to them in those moments. And I always encourage them. I'm like, hey, this message could not have related to you any way, but the Lord still wants to have a personal relationship with you. And it's amazing to see when students step into that. They're like, whoa, Yeah, it is. The Lord met me here. The Lord had an encounter with him here, And so I just think that it's amazing to understand the love of God. One of the cool things is that Mike said that our trust is actually connected to the understanding that we have of the love of God. You can't trust someone that you don't have an affection or a love for. No. Like we work together, and if we are collaborating and working together on a project, or trying to have something, or even just the staff in general or whatever, like if we don't trust each other, and we don't trust each other out of the relationships that we have with each other, we're going to struggle. And it's the same way with, any family dynamics or whatever. When there's not love as the foundation, things begin to crumble, and trust is one of those things that I think are interconnected with love in such a tangible way, and it's important.
It is, and it brings up one of those things that has spanned all of the messages so far.
Yeah.
Pastor Mike has continued to really say, hey, so this year, what are you going to do because of your love for God?
It's huge.
In the past, I've really had kind of more of this thing of, okay, what am I going to do for God? And honestly, that doesn't stem from relationship.
Yeah.
Like you can have no relationship and still do something for him.
Yep.
Be, trying all kinds of things, and it begins to really creep into just works-based stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that whole thing, man, you plug in because of my love, not for him, but because of my great love for him and because of his love for me, man, that's that relational piece that begins to burble up, and it does. It makes a complete difference in the attitude, the heart behind it. And now, instead of flowing out of like duty, obligation, trying to please, all that kind of stuff, it is a response. It is a natural response that will come from a place of my love for him and an understanding of his love for me. That is this reciprocating thing that begins to build that relationship, and it flows from relationship, just like you were saying.
Absolutely. It's so crucial. And one of the things that was actually getting into the message that was this past Sunday, the talk about obeying God out of love. Not and that can be a concept in and of itself that I think is hard to unpack for a lot of people, because they see God as a rule keeper who is just he's just creating this list of like things that I have to do.
Right.
And we just are like, okay, well, I need to check this off and this off and this off, and if I don't do it, well, I guess I don't love him and all of this stuff. And it's like, well, if you do it and actually reverse it and do it out of your love, you're going to find that those things are easy to do, and it's not as much of a checklist or something that you're looking at as this task to accomplish, And one of the things that Pastor Mike opened that message up with was saying that God's love for us should actually shape the way I live, and that's the way that you're talking about. Like it should be a mark that begins to shift the way that we see situations, we see people, we see the circumstances that we face, and ultimately we see our relationship with the Lord, and being able to trust and trust in his guiding hand over our life. And I think that it's so hard for a lot of people to connect love and obedience, but as I feel like it's one of the things that maybe parents can relate to. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that there is a way that the Lord interacts with us that's similar to a parent interacting with their kid. You know what I mean? Where you're asking for obedience, but not just because. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have an experience or anything like that.
I'm smiling because as you're about to go into that thought, I was actually thinking of like, oh my gosh, like there's so many times as a parent where you have that whole thing of like, hey, obey. And they're like, well, why? Because I said so, And I in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm trying to figure this out. I need you just to do it. But God's not like that. Like he's not just, because I said so. Man, it's because of my great love for you. It's because I'm a jealous God, and I see that there's a better thing for you over here that you can't have until you release that other part. And so I think there's a lot of times I wish I had more of that thing. It's out of my love for you. I'm like, no, I don't want you to do that. Stop it. It's annoying, So I do. We have a lot of, I think, and honestly, that's sort of what informs our thing. It was like we have this pushback as humans. If we hear the word obey, even if it's something that we were already going to do, someone goes, okay, you have to do this. You need to obey. Shh. We start to bristle. Like, oh,
Yeah.
tell me what to do.
Exactly.
And so there's that element to us that that we have to bring in line, and it will. The more that we have relationship, the more that we know of His love.
Yes.
And we're like, oh yeah, this is actually for my benefit. This is for my good.
Yeah.
And for my growth. Then hopefully we'll begin to,
Yeah.
to see that part of us die that's like, nah.
Well, and one of the cool things that that Pastor Mike actually brought up is one of the greatest examples biblically of that set of rules that so many people look at, especially from the outside in, maybe who don't have an understanding of God and His love, the Ten Commandments. You know, in Exodus, the tablets that were given to Moses was actually this thing of God's love and extending His love. I loved the way that Pastor Mike brought the first 5 or 6 commandments were done because of love of God, right? Yes. And then you have the back half, which is a love for people. And it's like, man, I love that we can connect something which a lot of people would look at as like the ultimate rule book, right? Like that's the reason why so many people look at Christianity and our faith and they go, wow, I can't keep up with the 10 Commandments. You know what I mean? And so I loved that he was able to draw something that so many people look at in a negative light or in a light that is constricting or confining, and actually saying, no, this is actually, we can live a life of freedom through these commandments because of the love of God. And I thought that was such a really cool thing, because so many people do see that as like you know, like, oh man, I just got to keep all of these things, you know. And I love the way that Pastor Mike, he if you ever talk to him personally, he will tell you he loves the Exodus story. So he's always gonna bring ways to bring that story in, because it's a perfect example of what it looks like to really live out a life for God, dedicated to Him, to be a follower, to do all these things. Because you see time and time again the people of Israel not following and falling short, and it's why they didn't inherit, you know, the land that was promised to them, a lot of them. And so I just thought that was a really good thing, because so many times we see obedience as this rule book, you know. I mean, what stuck out to you? Anything specifically in this past week that really stuck out?
Yeah, I think it was a really good tie-in to the week of fasting. And there's this thing of obedience, and, and especially something that is so there's just a lot of feelings that come up with fasting, and that's the nice thing too. One of the things that Pastor Mike, and I think all of us on staff, we're pretty real with each other.
Yes,
and he's real from the stage, and so
for sure.
He's even saying that none of us are like, oh yes, fasting, awesome. But then there is that piece of like, okay, you know what? There is this beneficial thing of me coming away, spending time with Jesus, and that when we walk in obedience to those things, even though they're not comfortable, it's not something that we would automatically go, oh man, that's for me. That there is a process, there is something that we are beginning to cultivate in our lives as a discipline, and as a part of bringing us back to just the reality. And this has kind of been made real for me in this last week or two. Man, how frail we are as humans. It's very easy when things are good, when we are well fed and healthy.
Yes.
And even in a season of health, that we're like, oh man, I'm gonna live forever. Things are cool. Like, and there's not that understanding. And then like my family and I we were sick like a week ago. And there was a moment I'm like, I just want to die. and then you realize
we all reach that moment.
Like, I am so frail. My humanity, and I tend to think of myself as almost bulletproof sometimes. But then we realize, man, God in His sovereign love, like He reached out as Almighty to these frail human beings that are gone in an instant. And so just realizing, and in that moment finding a little bit more of that love, and so wanting to make sure that. I don't know, trying to keep more of that in mind. Just frail humanness.
Absolutely.
And His awesome power.
And another note, as Pastor Mike got into the discipline of fasting, that I really appreciate, especially in a culture where you see more and more people struggling with the thing of food, which is what is particularly asked in the Bible about fasting. And that is that he was like, hey, listen, if food is a struggle, or if you need that, like maybe you have a dietary thing, or maybe there's something going on, like do not do this in this way. Find something else. And I think that so many times we look at fasting, especially when we read about it, and we go, oh man, I just got to do without food, or I got to do this. But really, ultimately, it's about the posture of your heart. And I would say that there are, especially younger, again, because I deal with youth and young adults a lot, there are a lot of people who I would say struggle more with a social media. They need more of a social media fast, or more of an entertainment fast, or more of a video game fast than they would even fasting from food, because food is such a natural part. But it would actually be denying themselves more to fast in some of these other areas. And I really appreciate that, because I think that we can get very legalistic, especially when we're in a spot like today where it's Friday or Saturday and we're about to break it and we're almost done and all this stuff, and we just get so caught up. And then eventually sometimes I feel like we can shift into that moment of, well, I'm just not eating, but I'm not actually spending time with the Lord. I'm just not eating. And then we're ending up just not feeling good and feeling sustained because we're not experiencing that. And so I love that again, we have a pastor who is very real in explaining and guiding people in that. And so what has your experience been in this past week with our church fast? What have you been fasting? How have you been making it work? What have you been experiencing? We would love to be able to hear that. I'm really excited as we close this series out this Sunday for the message about loving other people. And really that element of taking the love that we have for God, the love that God has for us, the way that we obey, and then the way that we love other people. I think that that's a perfect way to just encapsulate this journey through just expressing and unpacking what the love of God looks like.
Definitely. And another perfect opportunity is that Sunday evening we'll have a time of prayer and worship and fellowship. And so that's another kind of that lid on the jar.
Yes.
Here we are. We've talked about God's love, and now we're going to express that to Him.
Yep.
And we're going to express that love to each other by praying for one another, lifting each other up, and entering into this year, man, really on that platform of praise, prayer, worship, and time together.
And we've been really, we say it all the time. We believe that we are called to be a church of prayer. And so we say it as a staff. You've heard Pastor Mike say it. If you can be at a service on Sunday, make sure it's that 5:00 prayer service. We want you to be there. Watch online, watch later in the day, do whatever you have to do on Sunday morning. Get there Sunday night. You're not going to want to miss it, especially because we're kind of retuning and scheduling. I don't know if that's the right word, but we're changing up the feel of what that prayer and worship night looks like. Could you just break down what that is going to look like for people so they can expect it? Because I do think that it's going to shift a lot moving forward in 2023.
Well, it's really cool. So for the most part, we've just had this time of prayer and worship, and now we're adding this element of fellowship. So at 5:00, we're going to get together. We're going to share a meal over in the Family Life building.
Yep, the new renovated.
Yes, newly renovated.
Oh man, if you have not been in the Family Life building for whatever reason, come for that. Like it is amazing to see the work that has been done.
No, it's really nice. It's come together, and so it is going to be a great spot to just hang out. Like there's a piece of connection that I think even though we've come together in these areas, that's been just anemic. It's been there, but it hasn't been healthy and robust. And so throughout this year, we're going to be there's actually been some gentlemen who have come along and said, they're like, man, we'd love to cook, and is there a possibility we could make meat? And they're like, yeah, you can make meat.
Heck yes.
So it's going to be a great time. We're going to start with that, and then enter into a time of prayer, praise, and fellowship.
And if you're confused, you're like, why are we eating? Typically, we've kicked off our 3-day fasts with prayer and worship. We're actually closing times of fasting. That's going to be how that's done. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. I'm sure Pastor Mike will be talking about it on Sundays, about what that looks like moving forward when it comes to that. If you're confused, like, hey, I thought that was kicking off our fast, what's going on here? We are shifting it, and I do believe that it's going to shift how we experience the Lord and how we engage Him together in those times. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be cool. So we're going to be in the Family Life building on Sunday at 5 p.m. We'll come over here. We'll make the pilgrimage across the gravelly grain. Oh, man.
Bring your knee pads just in case you
Yes,
fall.
the parking lot is it's fun, man.
Scary.
We love it. But we'll be coming back into the main auditorium for the time of prayer and worship. And again, if you can be at one service, please make plans to be at that service. That is the most important thing that we feel like we can do on a Sunday, especially those kind of Sundays. And so, but I am looking forward to the message as well on that Sunday morning.
Absolutely.
Please join us in person or online at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. We're going to be flashing the phone number. Please text in your
Sure, there for a second. Flashing. Oh, the phone number. Yeah, flashing the phone number.
we're going to be just giving you guys the phone number to be able to text your questions.
Right.
We want to be able to answer questions and to be able to engage in that way. We had that the Q&A, a little under a year ago, I think. Yeah, something like that. And we just realized that there are a lot of things that people are asking, a lot of things that maybe you're, I don't know if I should. It'll remain anonymous. Like maybe you have a question that somebody else is curious about. Absolutely. And we'll be unpacking some questions that maybe even me and you want to discuss as well, because we do believe that that's an important aspect of this as well. Thank you so much for watching and listening wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're in a United group. Those are about to kick off here pretty soon.
Yes.
Excited about that. And so whether you're in a United group, small group with some other people, or you're watching this by yourself, thank you so much for engaging in this way. We really believe that, as Jeremy said as we started this thing off, that you can't really encapsulate everything in a 30 or 40 or 50 minute message even. No. And so we do believe that this is a great time to unpack this. Thank you so much for unpacking it with us, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe. You can also subscribe to our podcast if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We have a lot of really cool things. We have the Sunday morning message. We have the Wednesday night message that's now on our podcast, our main church podcast. And then you can also listen to Sunday Plus. So there's 3 shows within one podcast when you subscribe. It's like a 3-for-1. So awesome. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.